The issue at hand today is to look at United Nations Migrants Day, United Nations Migrant Day. That's going to be on Wednesday. That's about 2 days from now. So we're going to be doing some talk ahead of that now. And let's look at Africa's irregular migration issues. And to look at all this with us this afternoon, we're so privileged to have Francois Xavier Ada, and he's in charge of media and communications with the International Organization for Migration in Nigeria. He's joining us virtually this afternoon from Abuja. Mr. Xavier, a very good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon to you too, Evans, and good afternoon to all our listeners and viewers in Benin.
Okay. All right, so we're glad to have you. You're joining us from Abuja, and we're speaking to you from Benin City, the heartbeat of Edo State, and of course the capital of Edo State. Now, I don't want to say that Edo people seems to be notorious for wanting to travel out of the shores of the continent of Africa through the Mediterranean. Now, I was actually involved in some discussion about a few days ago, and I heard some guys saying that, hey, it's dry weather at this time. The Mediterranean is kind of receding, it's drying up. So this is the best time to go to Europe through the Mediterranean. Now, Mr. Xavier, from your own experience, what would you say has remained the problem? I mean, despite the threats, despite the dangers that are involved, you still have people, taking this deadly route to want to travel over outside the shores of this continent. What are the issues?
Well, Evans, I think we're touching on a very interesting, but also very sensitive issue that requires us. We need a bit of time to go through it. The first thing I would say is that irregular migration and its corollaries, such as trafficking in persons and migrant smuggling, it thrives on ignorance. So one of the main issues that we have is a lack of information, lack of complete information on regular migration pathways. What our data shows is that we have a number of people who embark on these irregular journeys from states such as Edo, as you mentioned, but also from across the country in Nigeria, as well as the continent. But they embark on these journeys without the full knowledge of what is waiting for them along the way. What we hear people tell us is, I didn't know. So what people didn't know was that they would have to spend some time in Niger while their boga, be negotiating passage for them. What they didn't know was that they would have to spend a bit of time on a truck, driving on a truck for 5-10 days, sometimes in the desert without water, without any food. What they didn't know was that they would get to Libya, and then in Libya, they would be literally sold from one smuggler to another, who would not take consideration of whatever they had paid before and would ask them for more money. What they didn't know was that the money that they potentially paid someone here in Nigeria, for example, was only for the crossing of the Nigerian border. They didn't know that when they got to Libya, when they got to Niger or Algeria or anywhere else, they would have to pay additional money. So what you find out is that a lot of people do not actually have access to adequate information to help them make informed migration decisions. The second thing is that we have noticed a proliferation of these trafficking and smuggling rings. A lot of people, a lot of these rings exist, including in Nigeria, where we prey on the fact that people don't have information. We prey on people's ignorance to sell a lie to them. The lie is sold that life is, let's say in Italy, life will be better in Spain, which it can be argued it could, but it also couldn't. The full picture is never fully given to the people who decide to embark on these journeys. And this is what causes, and this is where the drama usually unfolds, because without having the full information, you're vulnerable to anyone coming to sell a lie to you at any cost. Behind all of these, the bedrock of all of this, as we all know as well, is a situation where a lot of young people, who are the majority of the people who are migrating irregularly, do not have access to employment and economic opportunities that enable them to be independent, but also to thrive. It's not just enough to be independent salary, but you need to be able to thrive in the place where you are. And so you have the combination of all these factors that are making young people vulnerable and interested not just in migrating, but also in migrating irregularly. The last thing that is worth mentioning is the fact that the availability of regular and safe migration pathways, the windows are reducing globally. where it is increasingly harder for people from certain parts of the world to get visas or to get employment opportunities or educational opportunities. And as I was saying, the combination of these factors creates a moment or a space where young people are eager not just to migrate, but migrating irregularly because they see it as the only way for them to realize whatever dream they have.
Correct is it that there is a syndicate because what we hear back home in Nigeria is that the reason why irregular migration has continuously been a big business is that there is a syndicate, that seems to be, flourishing in this business. I mean, we are talking about it now, and who knows? There are some group of persons that are even preparing. They want to leave at any moment. So, how correct is it to know that there is a syndicate that seems to be, kind of encouraging? I mean, we hear that there are agencies in the Mediterranean, rescue agencies that rescue these, trapped Africans that want to leave the shores of the continent. How correct is that?
I mean, what we always tell people is that they are free to migrate wherever and whenever they want, but they have to be sure that they do it the right way. I think migration is a human right. Migration is as old as time and history itself. And we cannot, at any point in our lives, stop people from wanting to or from migrating themselves. But what we advise and encourage people is to migrate in the right way. That is having all the documents that you need, ensuring that you have the right documents that enable you to enter in a country, the regular way, so you don't find yourself at odds with the laws of the land wherever you go. Ensuring that you have enough funds to support your migration journey, your migration experience. And now, yes, there are networks. There are all these networks that are proliferating, that are growing, and that are offering opportunities in Canada, in Vietnam, in the US, in China, in Japan, to people, be it students, being young professionals who are eagerly wanting new opportunities, but who sometimes do not verify. What we often get to tell people is, please verify whatever information you were provided. And a litmus test that I always give people is this: if you have to pay to get a job, then something is wrong, because a job is supposed to pay you. But if you find yourself in a position where you have to pay, then this becomes a problem. So what we do in our advocacy is to try to encourage people to identify the red flags when we have such recruitment systems that are being proliferated around, so that people can recognize what is a fake offer, what is a scam, in order not to fall for it. Because people end up paying a lot of money. A lot of money is being paid to these agencies, to these bloggers, to help passage. But this usually does not end up where people want it to end.
So you talked about irregular offer. Now, because most times this irregular offer, you may not know. I mean, imagine somebody that is a family relative and all that. He tells you that, look, I just want to make the change in your life. After all, you have some of your senior siblings outside the shores of the continent, and they are making good for themselves. How do we really identify these offers? Let's know them. How do we know?
Well, that is, I think, the heart of the question here, and it's a very good one. Let's take, for instance, employment offers. You get an employment offer that says, we can get you a job in Vietnam. The first question that I would ask is the company registered in Vietnam? And does the company have the right to get workers from Nigeria? What people need to know is that countries often have bilateral labor migration agreements. That means that there can be an exchange of migrant workers between various countries. So when you get an offer that says work in Vietnam, the first question you ask yourself is the country legal, and do they have the right to recruit people from Nigeria? And to check that, you can go with the Federal Ministry of Labor and Employment, as well as other MDAs that are specifically working on labor migration and labor employment. The second thing that you need to check as well is the documentation that you provided. A lot of the time, and again, we have met with a lot, IOM does a lot of work of returning, helping people who are stranded return home. And a lot of the time, what we find out is that people often go without a contract. I mean, it's the very basic thing. If you need to get a job, the first thing you need to have is a contract. So do you have a proper contract? Is the contract notarized? Is the contract verified by a legal entity that you can also cross-check? You can have your own lawyer do a verification. These are some of the things that you can do when you are provided with a certain offer. The same thing goes for education opportunities. A lot of young people today are trapped into false education opportunities, and the same verification system needs to be happening. Is the university authentic and verified? Many of the universities we have only are in one building. That is not a university. It is just a front for recruiting students and trapping them into forced labor and other situations. So you have to verify, is the university legitimate? You have to check what their background is, how many students they have graduated, how long they have been in operation, and then follow up with who are the teachers, are the courses legitimate, is the diploma recognized? Because a lot of private universities are often used as fronts for the recruitment. So a lot of verification can be done. And if someone feels like they cannot do it by themselves, thankfully, across the country, we have what we call migrant resource centers. In Lagos, in Benin, in Edo State, in Abuja, we have what we call the migrant resource centers, where someone can go for free and get advice on migration information that they received. That helps them to check whether what they have in front of
Migrant Resource Center you talked about. Now, I'm happy that you mentioned it because a lot of persons are not even aware of these opportunities, hence they dabble into the opportunity given to them. After all, it is an opportunity for them to live this country. That is on one side. Now, on the other side, Mr. Xavier, now you'll discover that the World Migration Organization, there's no doubt, is at the forefront of fighting irregular migration. But the biggest challenge it has is the very uncooperative disposition of other, agencies, state agencies, if you like, state governments and all that. I don't know how the World Organization for Migration is coping with all these challenges.
I mean, for us, we have been working in Nigeria since, I don't want to say a bad thing, but at least for the past 20 years. And we have enjoyed a good collaboration with the government of Nigeria. I think it is a relationship that has been built in, first of all, understanding what the promise and what the value of migration is for the country, which is something that today the government understands that 20 years ago, it was not the same level of understanding was there. And we're proud of having accomplished that to helping authorities in Nigeria see the value that there is in investing in migration or in making migration work for the benefit of all. It's worth noting as well that migration is a cross-cutting issue, which is why we have to work with a number of government entities at the same time. For instance, when you talk about health, one thing that the COVID pandemic taught us is that health is deeply linked to migration. You have to have a good handle of border management if you want to protect yourselves against future pandemics. Same thing when you talk about security and insecurity. We have more than 2 million internally displaced people currently across the country, and that mobilizes expertise from across the board in the government. When you talk about return and reintegration of migrants, you have NCFRMI, you have NAPTIP. When you talk about trafficking in persons, you have the Ministry of Interior when you talk about border management and security. And so you have a number of authorities of state government, ministries, departments, and entities that we have to coordinate with, which is not always easy, but it is necessary. It's necessary because it is everyone's expertise that is needed around the table to ensure that we have a migration governance that meets the needs of the country today. So today, for instance, Nigeria is reviewing its national migration policy, bringing all these stakeholders around the table to ensure that the migration policy that we have for tomorrow in Nigeria meets the needs for Nigerians as well as for migrants living in Nigeria.
All right, so the program is still Africa Discourse on independent television. We're looking at a very important issue on the continent of Africa, the issue of irregular migration. And this afternoon, we're so privileged to have Mr. Xavier Francois Ada. He's in charge of media and communications with the International Organization for Migration in Nigeria. We'll go for a short break now. We'll be right back. Please stay tuned. All right, thank you one more time. The program is still Africa Discourse on independent television. We are looking at the issue of irregular migration on the continent of Africa. Just as we said at the opening that it is dry weather here in Nigeria and parts of Africa. Now you have some people that believe that, hey, it is Hamilton, then the Mediterranean is kind of receding. This is the best time to want to leave the continent through the Mediterranean. And if you do that, that is an irregular way of living the continent, and it has its effect. Now, we understand that irregular migration is not a first choice. We know a lot of persons that have left through that means it wasn't as if it was their first choice. Now, there are reasons that they had to take to that choice. So we're going to be looking at all that later on the program as we see how we can, further discourage this irregular migration in Africa. And we still have Xavier Francois, who is the spokesperson for IOM in Nigeria. Now, Mr. Francis, Mr. Ada, now, I don't want to say that the Edo State government is not collaborating, but what has been the level of cooperation from the Edo State government so far?
Well, I am happy to say that we have had a very good level of cooperation with the Edo State government. Ever since we started working in Nigeria, I think the data, again, all that we do with IOM, we try to anchor it in data. And what we noticed was that a lot of the people that we were helping return, IOM has helped more than 40,000 Nigerians now return from Libya, Niger, Algeria, Mali, and all the other countries where they were once stranded. And what we realized was that as we helped them return, when we asked them, where do you come from? The top 3 states that they would mention as of last year is our Edo State, Lagos State, and then Kano. So we realized that Edo was consistently the top state from where people came from, which made us think, well, what kind of programs then can we run to prevent? Because this is also the key. We cannot always be responding. We need to invest in preventing and working at the root. And so ever since then, we've implemented a range of programs that had a number of targets. The first was to ensure that the migrants that return have adequate support to reintegrate their communities and their societies. So in that regard, we have tens of thousands of young Nigerians who have returned to embark in what we call reintegration journey. But we've also invested in a number of programs to address specifically the issue of human trafficking. Human trafficking particularly is pervasive, and Edo State is one state that is known for having a lot of its natives involved in trafficking in persons, specifically in countries such as Spain, Italy, and Belgium. So we do a lot of work that aims at preventing trafficking in persons, that is awareness raising, speaking in communities, working with religious leaders, community leaders, working with the youth to ensure that the message is passed across on what the realities of trafficking in persons are. And more recently, we are also now investing in a number of programs that aim to train and equip youth people with technical and vocational skills. Because one thing that we realize is that one thing that drives the young people towards these is the fact that there are limited economic opportunities. So what we do is we work with the Edo State government through Edo Jobs to provide skills, training, acquisitions programs, to refurbish training centers. We recently rehabilitated a training center in Ebomodu, as well as in Edo itself. We work very closely with Edo Jobs to train young people, but also provide them with startup kits and startup packages, with the hope that this is not something that will tell them, oh, don't migrate. The idea is not to tell people not to migrate. The idea is to provide people with more options that enables them to make much more safer migration decisions. We hope that by providing them with more economic opportunities, by making them more self-autonomous, they then have the confidence to then do things directly.
All right. When you talk about economic opportunities now, the question we ask too that is, these are economic opportunities that you offer these returned migrants. Are they better after all? I mean, somebody that may have lived in Libya maybe has a better way of making money compared to the person back to Nigeria. These opportunities, are they better?
Well, the people we have helped and the people we continue talking to, they are much better. Because when you hear someone telling you how they were sold into prostitution in Libya, how they were raped several times in Libya, how they had to escape while being pregnant, how when they returned home, they were ostracized and sent out by their family members who did not want them. When you have this story, and then when you have us providing them with psychosocial and mental health support, with medical care, with support for putting their kids, the child in school, and then helping you set up a small shop where you can sell your groceries or where you can sell whatever you want to sell, or set up a computer store, or set up your activity. Certainly, it doesn't make you a millionaire, but however, it gives you, first of all, independence. It gives you social independence, but it also gives you economic independence. That makes it easier for you to rebuild your life with dignity. You have a lot more ownership of what you want and how you want your life to be. Certainly, there's a lot more that can be done, but then we recognize as well that we are an international organization with limited financial capacity, which is why then we work a lot with the state governments across Nigeria to ensure that whatever we do can be sustainable, so that the state can take over whenever we disengage, whatever that would.
All right, so the issue of migration we're talking about now is really not about leaving the shores of Nigeria or leaving the shores of Africa. Now, we have somehow something similar. I mean, migration also, I mean, for somebody that leaves his state and go to another state, maybe the person was forced to that state, has also migrated. Now, how does the IOM, how do they deal with migration within a certain country, say Nigeria?
Excellent question. And I think perhaps that's where we would have started, Evans. I mean, by reminding people that migration is simply the movement of people from one point to another. If there's been a movement from point A to point B, then that has been migration, regardless of the reason, regardless of the conditions, whether it was forced or voluntary, regardless of whether you went there for love, you moved for work, you moved there for family, you moved there for education, it doesn't matter. As long as there has been a movement of one person from point A to point B, then we have had a moment of migration. And we are involved in all of this. So our portfolio of activities across Nigeria aims to support the Nigerian government in strengthening migration governance and to respond to this wider range of migration movements that we have. So we mentioned it already in the number of irregular migration and trafficking in persons and returnees that we support. But we also do a lot of work in providing emergency humanitarian response to people who are internally displaced in the northeast, northwest, north central of the country as a result of insecurity, but also the compounding effects of climate change and environmental degradation. So what we do is help them with providing them with shelter, food, non-food items, but also psychosocial support. We also then do a longer term work with state governments in doing what we call durable solutions. That is, how can we effectively put an end to forced displacement? And one of the things that we do is working now with certain states, provide more decent housing to people who are internally displaced, for instance. How can we provide them with more sustainable livelihoods for people who are internally displaced, all with the aim of ensuring that the dependence on international humanitarian assistance is reduced and the people can go on and live their lives the way that they want it to be. But certainly there's a lot more that needs to be done when we talk about internal migration. We do not talk enough about internal trafficking in persons that happens in the country, in Nigeria itself. And this is rooted sometimes in our own internal practices and customs that we have. I mean, you know it better than I. Sometimes you have conditions where they say, oh, let me send this small child to this other person who is going to work. And then there's going to be a small amount of money that is transferred. That is a form of child abuse, exploitation, and potentially a form of trafficking, because the consent of the child is not provided, but also the child is made to work, which is also a crime. There's a Child's Right Act within Nigeria that criminalizes child labor. And so we don't talk enough about the dynamics of internal migration that sometimes have negative consequences, and it is important to bring light on this.
Talking about solutions, for displaced persons. I mean, there's a displaced camp close to us in Benin. I'm talking about the IDP camp in Ohogwa in Benin City. Now, the IOM, are there plans to assist these internally displaced persons, maybe back to their roots? Are there plans like that?
Well, our assistance is definitely open and possible, but we respond also at the request of state government. So What we're currently doing and what we remain open to do is working with the state government. Should there be a need and should there be a request for our support, this is definitely something that IOM could invest and prepare itself to respond. As we do, if I should add, as we do in other parts of the country as well.
Okay, all right. So you're going to be responding to the state government in that line.
Should there be a request, we are happy to do all we can to ensure that everyone and no one is left behind in Nigeria.
Okay. All right, so we'll go for another short pause now. Don't forget the program is still Africa Discourse, and we're looking at ahead of the United Nations World Migrants Day and the issue of migration in Africa. We'll be right back. Please stay tuned. All right, thank you one more time. The program is still right here, Africa Discourse. And on set with us this afternoon, we still have Mr. Francois Xavier Ada, who is the spokesperson for the IOM, that's the International Organization for Migration. He's joining us virtually from Abuja this afternoon. Now, Mr. Xavier, you see, back in Nigeria here, there is a nomenclature we use for leaving the shores of this country. I mean, you're very familiar with these technologies. We call it the jackpot syndrome. Now, the reason why a lot of persons have a jackpot is because of the economic situation, like you rightly said a while ago. That's in Nigeria. But we won't agree that the economic situation in Nigeria probably is the same thing in other parts of Africa. Now, there seems to be a very silent impression that not until you leave the shores of Africa, maybe to the Europe, to the Western world, you won't make it in life. I don't know what you have to say about that.
I think you have put it very well. There seems to be an impression within our communities that success is achieved outside. And I think this is something that we need to learn to deconstruct progressively. I think this is a thought process or an idea that comes from, the remnant of our own history, as countries. We were once colonized, and I think our imaginaries are all still very much external looking. When you look at what we see on TV, what we listen to, what we wear, what we eat, what we drink, most of it is external. It comes from outside. And so our minds and our imaginaries are still very much geared towards the outside, which is why we have the concept, we have the idea that success can only be achieved by going elsewhere. And I think when you look back, even if you talk to our elders, they will tell you things that are similar. They'll tell you you have to go. There's always a sense that you have to go in order to become. The thing, however, is that today it has become you have to leave the country altogether. And these are ideas that we need to progressively come to deconstruct. Now, far from me and far from us to suggest that people should, suffer if they feel like they are suffering. But the idea and the mindset behind a migration needs to also be thought. We need to rethink it. And to suggest that life is only, that success can only be achieved after you have left permanently is perhaps too much to say. So this is how we can start in my opinion, approaching the whole Jackpot movement. As we said earlier, migration is as old as history itself, and people will always move. However, I think what we need to start questioning are the conditions, the conditions why, and the conditions how people are making the movements. The final thing that I would say on the Jackpot movement is we need to also then start having the conversations on the return. As much as people are trying to go, what we are also now starting to see, and when we listen to conversations, even with people online, you have a lot of people who are now considering returning back. And I think this is a conversation that needs to also be put on the table when we talk about migration. How can people return back home? How can we help people return back home when they have finished with their migration, essentially? And so these are conversations that are surrounding the Jackpot movement that I think we need to have. As a country, this is a conversation that Nigeria needs to have in order to better understand what type of policies need to be developed to help people just make the right decision when it comes to migration.
As we're beginning, we've seen it so far that irregular migration is so problematic, and that there are, effects of it. Every year we have statistics showing how number of persons have left Africa, left Benin City, left Edo State, left Nigeria, and of course going to Europe now through the Mediterranean. And sadly enough, we still have statistics of how many dies, how many people die through this very deadly routes of traveling to the Western world. Now, Mr. Xavier, now how do we begin to discourage this trend now? Where do we start from? Because whether we like it or not, like I said a while ago as we started, that whether we like it or not, as this program is on now, persons are making plans. They are packing their baggages and they want to live the next moment, even with the effects and all that. So how do we begin to discourage this trend? Where do we start from? Yeah, can we hear some now?
Evans, I think I
Yeah,
lost you for a
yeah,
minute.
yeah. Can you hear me?
Oh, okay, I'm back. I
Okay.
mean, thanks. On your question on how can we discourage people from irregular migration,
Yeah, where we should we start from?
the first is information, and there will be and awareness raising. We need to continue passing the message across because as we are doing this, like you said, people are making plans. And as we are doing this work of informing people of making the right decisions, there are other people who are cooking messages as well on how to mis and disinform people. So the information war around migration will continue, and we need to continue doing our part on days such as International Migrants Day, but also throughout the year, reminding people that there is a right way to do things, reminding people that there are migration resource centers where they can have access to information, reminding people that there is IOM, there is NAPTIP, there are several state government agencies that can provide information on migration, reminding people that not everything that they see on Facebook, on Twitter, on TV is gold, reminding people that leaving your country is not the only way for you to accomplish yourself. We need to continue putting the messages out there because let us remember, as we are doing work on putting the right information out, a lot of people are investing a lot of money in putting the wrong information out there. So that is the first thing, that is where for me we need to start. But the second thing is also we need to then invest more in the root causes. And one of the root causes, as we mentioned earlier, was lack of economic opportunity that are decent and dignified. And so this is then where we need to invest more in development, and especially targeting the youth, providing skills and economic opportunities for young people to thrive. Again, it's not just a question of making money, it's about thriving. You can have the money, you can make the money, but not be able to enjoy it. So a set of investments need to be made in communities that are specifically touched to ensure that young people have the skills and but they also have the opportunities in the areas that they're passionate about. One of the reasons, for instance, why people are sad and they decide to leave is because they will tell you, my dad forced me to go and study engineering when I wanted to go and study performance arts. And because I didn't want to, I left. And then one thing led to the other. They are failing at the house. Their dad does not like them. The dad has disowned them. And just like that, the person decides to leave in order to make the father proud. These are social pressures that are forcing a lot of young people into these decisions. So these are conversations that we also need to have. We need to have internal conversations as a society on what it is to succeed, redefining what makes someone, as we say, what makes a man, what makes a woman, and seeing beyond, specific job categories, but also understanding that people can thrive in different areas of work. Because the more we put expectations, especially on young people, the more pressure they have to achieve. And when they feel like they cannot achieve it the way that is expected of them, then they will find alternative ways to achieve these things. So we have information, then we need to have these conversations internally and investing then in pure development. We got to provide economic, academic, and employment opportunities to young people for them to thrive. And I think once we start investing in these, then the rest will fall into place. It is hard to give one medicine package to the situation, but there are definitely simple steps that we can start taking as communities, as international organizations, and also individually as people to ensure that our peers have access to the right information and that they make the correct migration decision.
2 days from now, to be precise, on Wednesday, is going to be the United Nations Migrants Day. Now, I'm going to be giving the opportunity to let Nigerians, perhaps Edulites, know this afternoon the plans that you have, so that we further sink this, effect of irregular migration to people. What are the plans on Wednesday?
Oh, we started already. We started last week, Evans. Last week, we already had the National Migration Dialogue. So we partnered with the NCFRMI, but also the Office of the Vice President, to hold the 10th edition of the National Migration Dialogue here in Nigeria. It was in Abuja, and it was a good moment to have a conversation with stakeholders at all levels, including at the highest level, on the importance of migration, the contributions of migrants to Nigeria, but also the contribution of Nigerian migrants to the rest of the world. Because this is important to then building and developing policies that are essential for the development of the country. Let's remember that migration is a key element for Nigerian people. We've had a civil society forum that was held in Abuja as well on the 11th. And today in Benin City, there was also an event that we partnered with a lady who is a survivor of trafficking in persons, who decided to train and coach 50 other young ladies who survived trafficking in persons and who returned to Edo State. And that was today held at the IOM office in partnership with Edo Jobs. So we are hosting a lot of these activities, and on Wednesday, we'll be having an online webinar on remittances. Remittances is one of the key things that we need to talk about when it comes to migration. Nigeria received close to $20 billion in terms of remittances in 2023 alone. That is a lot of money. So we are going to talk about how remittances can be key to fostering civic engagement, but also encouraging democracy. And that will be on Wednesday, of December, from 2 p.m. And I can send you the link so we can all join online.
Okay. All right. So you talked about Edo Jobs. And now there is a new government in Edo State. At least I know that you know that now. This new government, what is the level of cooperation so far? It's new though, but what is the level of cooperation so far?
We continue collaborating with the Edo State government. I believe that governance is continuing.
Okay. Okay. All right, so just...
So we continue working with the Edo State government. Our programs and our activities continue at the same level.
All right, I think we have to just try to see how we can, cooperate more. Governments at all levels should cooperate more and see how they can help the International Migration Organization to see how we can discourage irregular migration. We'll go for another short break. We'll be right back. All right, thank you one more time. So as we take the very last lap on the talk show this afternoon, we still have Mr. Xavier Francois there. Now, we've talked about the role of government, and of course, we talked about the role of your organization. But let's talk about parents. Parents, we must talk to them. We must continuously talk to them. Now, are there engagements from your organization to parents about irregular migration?
Absolutely, and particularly in Edo State, we work a lot with communities, in particular parents, young people as well, because this is sometimes a missing factor when it comes to irregular migration. One thing that we try to remind people is that migration decisions are never made in a vacuum. And the decision is never made by one person alone. The decision usually is influenced by a lot of other factors, including
still trying to get... All right, so Mr. Xavier. All right, so we'll just reestablish the connection back there. Now, just like what Mr. Xavier was trying to say, that irregular migration decision is never a decision that you make alone. If you have a younger star planning to leave, most especially ladies, they would have told Mr. Xavier. All right, so...
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, you go ahead. I was expecting to say something more.
Oh, okay. I was talking about the parents. I
Yeah.
think we had a network issue. And yeah, it is essential to engage with parents and community members. And what we do at IOM is we hold series of community dialogues. We invest a lot in the community dialogues because we realize that unless we go at the community level to hit on the hard issues, then we are not doing the job right. And it's by going in through community dialogues that we realize that the question of social pressures absolutely need to be addressed. The social pressures that is put on men to succeed, the social pressures that is put on women to becoming X, Y, and Z, the social pressures that youth have from other fellow youth on the things that they see on TV, these things that they see on social media. And these different things need to be deconstructed. So we work very closely with the parents, telling parents, you have to be much more realistic when you are raising your children. You have to be aware of what is influencing them and the influences that they are receiving from the outside. You have to be able to counter these influences as well with more positive messages and more positive alternatives. We similarly work with religious leaders because a lot of the times, religious leaders sometimes coerce young people into migration decisions by selling them dreams of, oh, you can get a visa, you can do X, Y, and Z. And so we work with them to tell them there are better ways that certain messages can be shared. And if someone comes to you with a certain information, then here's how you can counsel the person into making the right migration decision. So it is important, we think it's important to work with all these actors at the local level because they are, in the end, they are the ones that have the listening ear of the person who makes the migration decision. But they are also in the position to directly influence what decision is being made.
All right. One more last question before let you go this afternoon because we know you're very tight schedule and it's a great privilege that you are giving to us this afternoon. Now, one more last question. Apart from Libya and maybe one other northern or two northern African countries, now you have so many Nigerians trapped in other parts of Africa, in Liberia, in even in Togo, in Benin, our next door neighbor here, they're trapped there. They want to come back home, but they don't know where to start from. Are you reaching out to them? Are you helping them out?
We are responding to requests that we receive. And what I can say is if you know anyone who needs support, do refer them to the government. We work very closely with NAPTIP. We work very closely with NITCOM. We work very closely with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to help return and reintegrate people. So if anyone knows, we always tell them, do reach out, and then we will do always all we can. Now, IOM is a UN organization. We're not a country. We're not a state. And so we cannot intervene on behalf of a state. We can only intervene when a country has invited us to work or when they have mandated us to do something on their behalf. So if you know of anyone who has such an issue, who is trapped, who is stranded, or who was trafficked, or who feels like they were abused, they were sold a lie, they can always reach out. And then we will find a way to provide the support that we can as much as we can. Working in close collaboration with the federal government, with the state government, but also with the country where they find themselves in. This is why we exist as an international organization, to provide this help, this humanitarian help to those who need it the most. But it's important that people are also aware of it. So the message that we share is IOM is there. We work closely with the government, reach out to the government, and they always know how to reach out to us.
All right, so Mr. Francis, so it's, I almost say Mr. Francis now. Mr. Francis, we want to say thank you so much for sharing with us this afternoon. Very, very privileged that you give to us this afternoon.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Evans. Thank you for all of this.
Okay. All right, so this is where we draw the curtain this afternoon on the program Africa Discourse on independent television. Now, the issues are so clear and there. They are so clear in the sense that irregular migration is not the best way to live. We're not saying that migration is not your right. It is your right. If you want to leave your country, maybe in search of better life elsewhere, you have the right. But what we're saying here this afternoon is that you should live in a legal way. The more acceptable way, the most acceptable way, you have to seek for a visa. And of course, when a visa is granted, then you live. But the idea of trying to live through short corners, so you go through the Mediterranean and then you go through the desert, the Sahara Desert, is called irregular migration. And it's a big problem in Africa today. A lot of Africans have died through that route. Now, you saw the videos that we showed back at drop as the discussion was going. Those videos were shown to you to further buttress what we're talking about here. Now, if you go through some of the videos we have on the social media, you see how a lot of Africans, a lot of Nigerians have died in the Mediterranean. A lot of parents have not heard from their words from their children in a decade, in more than a decade, 20, 30 years. And most of the children have died in the Mediterranean because they wanted to jackpot. It has effects, so you must think twice. So you out there that is saying that, okay, it is the dry season now. I mean, the Mediterranean is dry. You can go through it and all that. You need to know that it is an irregular way of living, and it is irregular migration. It is not the best thing for you. So you must have a rethink so that you don't go and end your life in the Mediterranean. Well, the program is going to return same time and next week on this television. My name is Evan Sunuhuye. Goodbye and God bless you.